Welcome. My name is Chris Fisher, and we are going to talk today about implementing BDD, how one team is hopefully, maybe, making it work, okay? And I don't see a clicker in here, so you're going to have to excuse me because I tend to wander. So I'll probably be over there at some point when I need to be flipping slides. So before we get started, I just wanted to introduce myself. First of all, I have my LinkedIn QR code up here. So you can scan that from the app, or if you want to search for me on LinkedIn, I'm Christine Ketterlin Fisher, but I would love to connect with all of you, continue having conversations here at the conference or later on, so feel free to do that. So let me give you just a little bit of background about how I went from high school teacher to test manager, all right? So, right, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'll just tell you guys that right now. So I started my career as a high school teacher, graduated with a degree in secondary education, and taught social studies for 6 years. I taught grades 9 through 12, geography, government, world history, U.S. history, did it all. Let's go team. Try not to be too impressed by this, but I was also the head cheerleading coach, okay? I know, yes, yeah. We placed third at state one year. That was the best we did with my competitive squad. So I was a high school teacher, and when I decided to leave teaching, then I went into professional services. I took a job training in software. And I wish I could tell you that I really researched what my options were and thought about what I wanted to do, but I didn't. That was a fluke. I took a job that sounded good, but that spawned this entire second career in IT that I've had. So when I went into professional services, I started, like I said, as a trainer, managed a group of trainers, wrote training and development, project management, consulting, did all of that for quite a while. I traveled quite a bit with that. And so 6 years ago, I had my daughter. And when I did, I decided I wanted to stop traveling. And so I moved over to the development side. And when I moved into development, I went to a BA role, which was a very natural fit for me. I've always been a writer. I love my documentation. It was a good fit. In professional services, a lot of what I'd been doing was writing implementation specs, writing client-facing materials, writing a few basic implementation scripts with that. I became a business analyst, really enjoyed that piece, figuring out what the client needed, documenting that, being the middleman between the development team and the stakeholders. So I've been talking for a few minutes now, and I've never once mentioned QA, right? So at my previous company, I was on 2 different teams as a BA, and when I switched to the second team, we were a large company. We had a large office in Bangalore also, and the solution I was working on had been in Bangalore for the last 10 to 12 years, and they decided to bring that back to the US because we had a DoD contract, and so that had to be done, that development had to happen in the US. So when that came back to the US, we created a new team. There were 5 of us, I think, to start with, and we all had experience at the company, but we didn't have experience together, and we didn't know that solution. So we didn't have any norms. We didn't have any team processes or standards or anything. And we also, at that point, did not have a tester. We had an opening and we needed to hire a tester, but we didn't have someone. And I said, I will just do that. And I'm actually not a good tester, and I am fine to admit that. I can write a test. I can review a test. I understand how all of those things work, but my mind is really with the BA side. I tend to get caught up in all of the details and all of the documentation. And people who are great at QA have a different mindset than I do. They can look at something and really start to poke holes in it, and that's not what I do. I say, well, what can I document about all of this? So I could do it, and it was a stopgap for a while. But me taking that position while we were hiring somebody happened to coincide with what was happening at our company in the testing organization across the company, which was all of the shift left, moving away from long scripted tests, starting to look at automation, all of those things, right, that we know are good. But because we did not have a process on our team, I just was able to say, hey, I'll figure this out. So we didn't have anything that we had to change. We had kind of a sister team, but they had been in the US the entire time, and they had very, very deep processes around how they did their testing and the communication with that. And we didn't have any of that on my team. So I said, well, I'll figure this out. And so I did that, did a little bit of the testing, but did a lot more of the process. In the meantime, then, I hired a QA for that team. I was able to hand her that framework, and then she was able, because she did have that QA mindset, to really personalize all of that and figure out what to do. So we did that, and we ended up rolling out what we had done, how we had kind of transformed what we were doing, even though we weren't doing anything first, but what would work for other teams, to then the rest of our organization, which was about 300 people. So I think that was really my first foray into QA process. A little over a year ago, I had an opportunity at a new company to manage a team of BAs and QA. And I thought, well, that would be really good, expand my skill set. And I don't know what I was thinking about the QA piece. Oh, sure, I understand the importance of QA and I can do that, right? But I don't know. I think I maybe thought that I would be focused a lot on the BA, because that's really, teachers aren't supposed to have pets, but we always do. But then once I got in there, if you would have told me 14 months ago that I would be speaking at a testing conference, I would not have believed you. But once I got in there and realized the process and the things that needed to be done to improve what we were doing, I didn't have to have those testing skills. I had to have some process skills, and I needed to understand the work that was being done. And in the last years, I've really jumped into this world. So I've got my QA and my question marks. I still don't always know what I'm doing, but I'm really enjoying it. So that's a little bit of my background and how I got here. So our goals today, I'm going to talk to you about how my team is working through a significant process change. So we are going to talk about BDD, but if you are not doing BDD, if you're not interested in BDD, that's fine. We're going to talk about how you need to make a process, the things you need to do to make a process change on your team, because it's really hard to change the way you're working, because the work still has to be done, right? You can't just quit everything you're doing and learn something new. So we're going to talk a lot about what we did with that. I'm going to talk about why I think BDD is right for us, and then I'm going to share some tips, successes, and failures that we've seen in the last year or so. That's how it felt when I first learned about BDD. And it was about 2 years ago, so still at my previous company, and I attended a talk by a developer who was talking about BDD. It was the first time I had ever heard about it. And notice all of my exclamation points here, right? So a lot of buzzwords. And can you tell me what the main buzzword was, right? Automation, automation, automation. So he talked us through, we can have these scenarios, and it's going to be living documentation and reports, and it's easy to read, and we can all do this. Remember that, we can all do that, because I'm going to talk about how that didn't actually happen in a minute. And then all of the automation, okay? So at the end of this talk, he challenged us to go back to our teams and try BDD. And so I looked at my tester and said, do you want to give this a try? And she said, sure. So we went back. I told my boss, we'll try this. We'll try and figure it out. And he said, great. He sent me links to a couple of articles, and that was it. And then we didn't have any idea what to do. I read the articles. We looked at like the given, when, then scenarios. But what we had gotten from the talk was that we didn't need requirements anymore. And so if we didn't need requirements, I didn't know what I was supposed to do as a BA. But she wasn't quite ready to write all of those scenarios. So if she took that, then what job was I doing? And if I took that, what job was she doing? Because she was not automating those. We were supposed to pass those scenarios off to our engineers. We did not have any QA automation on our team. All right. So we struggled a little bit and tried to figure out exactly how we were supposed to do this. And then it fizzled really quickly, and then it completely stopped because I left. So we just ended that little experiment right there, all right? So I went to a new company, and I'm thinking about BDD. Like, there's some value there that I didn't understand based on what that talk was. Oh, the entire development team can participate. At one point, I stopped the developer who gave the talk. I'm like, hey, we are really struggling with this. We're trying it, but we can't quite figure out like where the division of work is between BA and QA. So what did you guys do on your team? He's like, oh, we didn't involve them. Okay, so that's not actually BDD, and I didn't know enough about it at the time. They were just automating tests using that given, when, then format. That's great. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but they weren't really doing BDD. So he told me that, and it didn't sit right, but I still didn't know enough about it to understand that was okay or not okay. So this was the first intro that I had to BDD. And then I went to a conference last year. I went to the Agile conference, and I happened to pick up this book, and I don't know if anybody in here has read it, the BDD Books Discovery. And this is actually supposed to be a series of 3. The last time I checked, the first one was still the only one published. So I don't know if the other 2 are out yet, or even the second one. But I would highly recommend this book if you have any interest in BDD at all. It's a quick read, it's short, it's easy to digest. I read it on the flight home from that conference. So when I read this book, sometimes you have a light bulb moment and you realize that you're having the light bulb moment, like, oh my God, yes, this is everything that I didn't understand. So reading this book was my light bulb moment. And I'm just going to share a few quotes with you directly from the book, because when I was reading these, all of the things that we did wrong in the try at my previous company, like those started to make sense. So first of all, the purpose of software development is to deliver solutions to business problems. And I think we all know that, right? We all work with different applications and we're all trying to deliver our best solution. BDD helps maintain a connection between the requirements and the software. Okay, so we can still have requirements. I took a deep breath with that. I really like my requirements, okay? I wasn't ready to get rid of those. So this is just another bridge between the 2. BDD does not replace classic testing and testing skills. So my manual tester, there's still room for her, all right? And then finally, improved test automation is one of the significant outcomes of following a BDD approach, but it is a downstream outcome. If you are choosing BDD just to automate your tests, the chances of you being successful are probably pretty low. This is a methodology. This is a process that you have to put into place. And that's where I realized that they didn't try BDD on that other team. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the approach they did, but they were automating tests based on a BDD concept, right? And so we didn't want to try it to automate, but we can get some additional benefit out of using BDD, and one of those is automation. So I read this book. I was so excited. I went back to my team. And have any of you ever had a boss who went to a conference and came back and said, guess what? I heard a talk. I read a book. I did something, right? So this was them. And we recreated this picture the other day with the thumbs down and people turned around and not paying any attention. And we ended up having a little bit of fun with this. But actually, I wish I could have taken a picture of when I pulled them all into the conference room and said, hey, you guys, I want to take this picture of your reaction when I first started talking about BDD, because that was actually more their reaction than, like, she's still talking about this and now she wants to take a picture of us. So, but we didn't know each other very well. So I started at the beginning of May, and this is now like the first week in August. So we didn't know each other very well. So nobody was actually doing this when I came back and started talking about BDD. They just smiled and then I'm sure went back to their desk and talked about me, right? And that's okay. That's all right. So this thing, why mess with a good thing? This was really important because I had this idea and I wanted to try it. Now I'm understanding the value of what BDD is, but I was not hired to fix a broken team. This team was pretty functional. They were writing decent requirements. There weren't a lot of misses. We had good tests in place, and we were starting to automate tests with Selenium. We were doing all of the things, right, that you're supposed to be doing. Now, there's always room for improvement, and I'm not saying that everything was perfect, but I was not hired to fix anything. And I'm brand new. I still had a ton to learn. Why did I want to mess with a good thing? And I spent a lot of time asking myself, do I want to mess with this? Is there something that I want to change here? And if I do, why? And so I think that's the first thing. If you're bringing in process improvement, if you're changing something that you're doing, make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons. And I still ask myself sometimes, am I doing this just because I'm new? I want to make my mark on something. Is this going to be successful? So those were a lot of conversations that I had back and forth with myself. But the reason I decided why we we wanted to try this, why I wanted to try this, I'm using we, right? Just the royal we, I'm going to drag them in with me, was because of the DevOps transformation. So 6 months or so before I started, they had announced a 3-year Stay Ahead initiative, DevOps, CI/CD, continuous delivery, moving all of our applications to the cloud, all of those things, right? So first of all, we are a traditional organization. And when I say traditional organization, I don't mean, I'm not talking about our industry, although we are in insurance, but I'm not talking about the industry. I'm not talking about our dress code. I'm not talking about the fact that we don't have beer Fridays or anything like that. What I'm talking about is that I don't work for a software company. I work for the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. It is a nonprofit organization, and it's been around for over 100 years. Our IT department now makes up about half of the company, and we've had applications in existence for 20 years or so now. So this software development, but we're not a software development company. It's becoming a very important piece of what we do, but that's not our goal. At my previous company, we were a major healthcare software company, and that's what we did. So this is very different, and when we're talking about DevOps, we had all of the roles that are part of software testing. So we had manual testers. We were starting to have some automation testers. We had BAs. Those people all reported to me. We have some product owners who are on a different team. Then we have our development teams. But we weren't looking to change that structure, right? I know some tech companies are going to say, we're going to make everybody an automation tester. We're going to get rid of QA. There are a lot of different things that are going to be done. That's not something that our organization was going to do. I don't think that those are good things to do, but that's not what this talk is about. And so we weren't going to change the people or the structure of the people, right? So that's important. Change is exciting. So with this, there was a lot, and there still is, there's a lot of buzz about what we're doing. We are using new tools, new technologies. We're doing development a different way. But who's using those tools and technologies? Our developers and our automation engineers. But I still have manual testers and I still have BAs. And I am very sensitive to the fact that their skills need to be developed as well. And the work that they are doing needs to change as well. We need to modernize those skills. We can't have this DevOps transformation and not transform all of the people. I think that that's really important. So I wanted to find a way to increase and expand their skills. And then finally, but what's going to happen to my job? There had been some talk of there's room for everybody, but the work that you do might change a little bit. And so I had a conversation with our chief architect at the time and really tried to nail down what is that message? What are we telling people? And there wasn't a great answer. And I said, then we need to stop telling people that because that's scary. If you know how to do one job, if you're good at your job, if you like your job, and you're being told that it might change, but you don't know how, that's a very scary position to be in. Okay? So it was part of this DevOps transformation and the BDD that really, this piece is what drove me to try BDD, because I do think as a leader, we have a responsibility. And we have a responsibility to drive change. We have a responsibility to move the team forward. And we have a responsibility to build skills and explore new ideas. And what I told my team is that we don't want to keep doing our work, especially manual testing and writing requirements. We don't want to keep doing that work in the same way we've always done it. And then somebody else, God forbid a developer, comes and tells us how we need to change our work, right? We need to take control of that. We need to try and figure out how we can change and what we can do to modernize our skills and to fit in with the DevOps transformation. Right. So our journey toward BDD, and the first start was not great. I decided to start with just our business analyst. And again, if you read the book, it's very clear that if you're thinking about BDD, if you're trying to understand the behaviors of your end users, you need to start those conversations before you even write requirements. And then you move on to manual testing, and then you move on to automation. And so I started with the business analyst only. I gave them an assignment, a reading assignment from the book that I brought back, which they loved. But no, it was very quick. I selected several different passages, but it probably took them a half hour, 45 minutes to read. So I had them all read that, and then I told them it was on them to meet as a group to talk about how they could incorporate those ideas into what they were already doing, and then schedule some time with me to present a plan. So they did what I asked them to, and they scheduled a meeting with me. And what their plan would be is that they would do the Three Amigos meetings as needed. Is everybody familiar with the Three Amigos meeting or a requirements workshop? Yes? No? Okay, so the idea is that you get a product owner or a business analyst, so somebody from the business in the room, you get a tester in the room, and you get a developer in the room. And there's a great example in that BDD book of exploring the idea of the pizza delivery service. And so you order your pizza, you want it delivered, and so very straightforward, happy path, we know what to do. And then they throw in this wrench of, okay, the address needs to be changed. We accidentally put in our work address, but we need it delivered to home. And so then everybody the testers can say, well, what about this? The developers can say, well, what about this piece? And it kind of hangs up in the scenario given in the book that if they give us the address change before the pizza leaves, then it's no problem, right? But what if the driver's already out in the car? Well, in the example, the developer says we don't have the technology without making a major change at this point to alert the driver, like through the application. And so it's that. You're talking through all of these scenarios, and that's where you're trying to understand what the behavior is, what the gotchas might be, and making a list of all of those. And again, that book really details how you can do that and how you can track those conversations. So what they decided is that they would do the Three Amigos meetings as needed. And we have in our department 4 different agile teams, so this group is distributed among those teams. That they would do them and that I would not be invited. And that was okay, right? We're still getting to know each other, but they wanted to just keep it like what the book described. They didn't want a manager in there watching what they were doing. And I decided to, okay, we'll let that one go. So I think each of the teams had 1 or 2 meetings. They tried it. Things slowed down really quickly because I let the team set the pace. And I'm glad that I did that. Again, we were still learning that, the trust and trying to work with each other, but it didn't really work. And then just as a matter of circumstance, coincidence, I don't think it was because of BDD or me. Like 3 of my 4 BAs all turned in their resignations. And then the 4th one followed not long after. So, and some of them moved internally. They had some different opportunities internally. 1 left the company, and it's fine. But what didn't really work in the first place then fell apart at that point because then I had a team to rebuild, and I couldn't go any further with this. So we got new people in place. We started working on that. And where things really changed was when we were able to have a BDD workshop. At the very end of the year, my boss said, hey, we have some extra training money, and if we don't use it, we won't get it next year. Does anybody have anything that they need? So to our management group. I do. I'll take some. So nobody else really put a claim on it. I took what we had, and I had at a different conference, a testing conference last fall, I had met some people and had some conversations with their company about things that they might be able to do, and again, to fill some of my QA gaps. And so I called my contact there and I asked her, hey, do you think that you can do a BDD workshop? And she said, oh yeah, absolutely. So very quickly we put this together. This workshop happened the Wednesday and Thursday before Christmas. All right, so Christmas I think was on a Monday or Tuesday last year. So, I mean, we are right into the holidays. Again, my team is thrilled with me that I'm asking them to do these things. They weren't really looking forward to this workshop, but we had a 2-day workshop. We brought people in from the outside, and we had 2 trainers. And I think that this was important because we had a people person and we had a technical person. So we would, because I made my whole team go, and we had the BAs who don't care about automation at all. Some of my manual testers are interested, some of them are not. And so we would do just enough of the soft skills, the theory, the why behind BDD, and then they would switch gears and they would talk about the automation piece and all of the technical pieces. And that was really important for the team. It kept both of them engaged throughout to have those two different people there. At the end of the first day, we did an open space with each of those trainers, and the team could decide which one they wanted to attend. They could, attend one and then go to the other for a while if they wanted to. But getting to talk to those people, ask their questions, ask some of their fears, and I went back and forth so they could do that without me around, and I think that helped as well. And when it was over, the team was really excited, which was fantastic. They were stopping by my office. We loved that. We want to try this. The second day of the workshop, so the first day was mostly theory. The second day of the workshop ended up being all hands-on. We took an example from one of our teams. We tried to write the feature files. So we tried to write scenarios. We reviewed those as a group to figure out, how that this was a lot harder than we thought it would be. And we, critiqued each other's and figured out how we could improve. And so we really got a lot from that. And I do want to make a point that we were very lucky to be able to do this, and I understand that. So I don't think if you are implementing BDD, if you're doing some other process change, that you have to spend money. I don't think that you have to go to an outside vendor. What I think was important was having new eyes in there, fresh faces who could talk the talk. I couldn't do that. I saw a lot of value from what I read in a book and then from some research that I was doing, but I didn't have the experience to back it up. I had started to look before we had this opportunity, started to reach out to some of my contacts in the community in Kansas City and, trying to see if I could get somebody local in to maybe just come in and do a talk. Having the money, being able to do the workshop, that was really nice. I don't think that was necessary, but I do think maybe bringing somebody else in, even if it's just a little bit to give their experiences, might make a difference if you're having a hard time selling a process improvement to your team. Then we went on holiday break, and people were in and out of the office, but I didn't really see anybody for 2 weeks. And during that time, I thought about what we had just done, because I didn't want to spend this money and have a good workshop and not do anything with those skills that we had gained. And I also wanted to think about what we really wanted to get out of that. So again, very lucky in what we were doing. I knew that there were probably some funds in this year's budget for a longer term consulting agreement, but I don't want to put my name on a high dollar contract if it's not going to be successful and if I can't show value to our organization. And so I spent some time writing a business proposal. My boss actually called what I wrote my thesis. I don't really think that was a compliment, but I do think she at least skimmed it. But I needed to put down, I told you I love my documentation, I needed to put down on paper what we had learned, what our goal was, and was this something that could really be successful? And if you go out and Google BDD, you're going to find a lot of failure stories. And so that, reading all of those one night, I kind of went down a rabbit hole. But that was terrifying. Is there anybody who's been successful with this? What are we going to do? So I just laid out what I thought we could do, what I wanted to get out of it, and what my plan was, how we could get started before we were going to spend additional money. I wanted to prove that we could do some of this on our own as well. So once I had all of that logically written, we came back from the holidays. Like I said, I gave it to her, we discussed, and that was fine. But we did start to make some changes on our team. So one of the things we did, we started having test strategy meetings. We had tried this with one of our teams already, and it was really successful with that team. And what we were doing every week after grooming, then we had grooming on Wednesday for that team. On Thursday, we would have a test strategy meeting with the QA and BAs from that project team. And we would go through those stories again and make a decision about what would be automated, what would be manually tested. With the idea of we're going to talk through BDD and what scenarios we should write, what our scenarios are, and then again, we can identify which ones we want to automate and which ones we don't. It still worked really well with the original team, and they were able to shift focus pretty easily. The other teams, some were more successful than others, but every team started doing this. We had weekly scenario meetings during first quarter. I called these poetry readings. And so the one thing that I did, what I learned from that false start earlier in the fall, where I had let the BAs kind of set the pace, is that I still wanted the team involved, but I also knew that we were not going to get anywhere if I didn't just say, we're going to stop writing scripted tests. And all of the different project teams were doing testing differently. So some were still writing step-by-step tests in Excel. Some were putting a few notes on a Jira. There wasn't a really cohesive plan around what each team was doing. And it was, the QA on that team knew what their process was. And so that piece, I said, that stops immediately after the first of the year. And so we are going to start writing these scenarios. And then during these weekly scenario meetings, the whole team would come in and we would go through them. And I know it put people on the spot to share what they had written, but the team was really great. Nobody was ever critical of what they were doing because we were all in the same boat. But just talking through, do we need more detail in that? Is this really the right thing? Can we split the scenario into two? And so I think that helped the team quite a bit. I also told them during that first quarter that plan on everything that you are writing, that's throwaway work. And that's hard, but that's honestly kind of what they were doing to begin with, right? Putting all of that information into an Excel sheet. They weren't going back and finding that and updating those. And so we were just writing manual tests in a different way, but I didn't want them to think that we had to automate these or that these tests had to live on. We had to get some practice doing it. So we did our weekly scenario meetings. We started creating a tag library, and this was very important. If you're doing BDD, you want to have a standardized universal language across your team. And so because we had multiple project teams, we want to make sure that we're using the same tags. So if I've got somebody writing a login script or a login test on one team and the tag is login, and on another team it's log_in, then as they shift teams because they get moved around, they need to be able to find those. And so we use Confluence Wiki. We started a wiki page with just what these tags are. So for the universal things like logging in, and then also application-specific things. So that way they have an idea of what their tags should be. And if they are on a new team, they can go in and they can look to see what people have been using. We started a Slack channel just for BDD questions, and that was nice. And that it's still, like, activity varies, but they'll put questions out there. I have all of these variables. How do I put those into my test? Anybody have any ideas on that? We moved our test to GitLab. So at this point, that wasn't exactly true, but we were getting ready to move the test to GitLab. So our automation engineers were very comfortable with GitLab. Our BAs and our manual testers were not. And so we wanted to make sure that we were getting everybody access to GitLab, that they understood how to put things in GitLab, put their documents in there, how they would edit those tests, because the idea is the manual testers are going to be writing these tests, writing the scenarios, working closely with the BAs to understand the behaviors. And so either one might have to go in and make an update to a test. And so getting everybody comfortable with GitLab and then starting to move our tests. And then again, I started on the paperwork to do a long-term engagement with the consulting firm. Again, somebody to just come in and kind of shore up what we are doing and what are our next steps. How do we put all of this together? And I think that that's probably, as leaders in the room, I think that that's something that probably all of you can identify with, is we don't have enough time. I could spend all of my time focused on getting this implemented, but realistically, I can't do that. There are a lot of other things that I have to do. And so having additional resources is going to be a big help. And so I started working on that piece. All right, I wanted to share some feedback from my team on what we've done, where we've been so far. No more stress about what test cases have been written, where they are stored, who is putting together a spreadsheet to track them, and how they are being divided up for testing. So we're starting to see some positive there. Will this work for our applications? This has been a question. I've had several people in my office. Like, we have old applications, complicated just in the fact that some of them are 20 years old. There are a lot of databases, a lot of dependencies. One of them relies on a lot of financial data input from third parties. How do we get all of that into these tests? So will this work? Are we wasting our time? I don't always know the answer. I think that it will, but that's a concern, and it's a valid concern that they have. It takes the messiness of use cases and test cases and streamlines the process into easy-to-read feature files. We started strong in first quarter, but died down some in second, which I absolutely agree with. We did a lot in first quarter, second quarter, because of some other things that were happening on the team. We didn't put as much focus on this. Right now, what we are doing with BDD is what I consider and work. So we're doing our everyday work, and we are trying to learn how to implement BDD on our team. And that's really hard. And I know, like, I don't want to dig into it too much, but I know that there are people who are writing scenarios to show me and then going back to their Excel spreadsheet on the side and really doing what they know how to do for testing. Because the first thing when we make a change and it gets hard and we are under pressure from a deadline is we go back to what we know. Right or wrong, it's our quickest default, right? It's the way we know how to get things done. And so that's something that I know that we did kind of fall off a little bit in second quarter. And so I'm afraid there's been a little bit more going back to what they know works for them and for their team. You keep saying this isn't just for automation, but sometimes it feels like it. Right? This is probably the one piece that, like, oh, okay, are we doing the right thing? Are we making sure we're getting the focus on the BAs and the work that the manual testers are doing too? And so I had them send me some of this probably a month ago. And since I have seen this, I'm really trying to make sure that the less technical people on the team understand the benefit in it for them and how this is changing their work, how this is expanding their skills. All right, so where are we now? We have consultants coming on Monday, actually. So we have about a three-month engagement, and they start on Monday. We have a BA, a manual, and an automated QA who will be coming to help support what we are doing. And again, I hate to say, like, that's what you need to do for process change. It's not, but for what we're doing, like, I'm very excited for this. I think that that's really going to help boost where we are going to be able to go. We have some API tests that have been automated. So one of the testers on my team, he just, like, is never sitting still. He always wants to, to try. He was doing a lot of the API automation. So he went and looked at how he could write these scenarios, how he could automate that. He started using Cucumber and moved his tests away from Selenium. And so we have some of those. We don't have any for the UI, and those are going to be the harder ones, obviously. But we at least have a start, and when we have that, we now have GitLab repos where those are. We have those API tests incorporated into our pipeline for an application, the one that's being rewritten. So it's not being released. It hasn't been released yet, and it probably won't for, I think we're looking at next spring as our release date. So we still have a while to go, but it's catching bugs. It's catching issues in the code. And so we have some success there, and that feels good. And our next steps will be to continue to get all of our project teams and our team members engaged. There's still some people who are like, well, she's telling me I have to do this, so I will. But I don't think that they are interested in it. I don't know that they love the idea. So trying to get the enthusiasm and the engagement up for everybody. Getting all of our teams writing automated tests. So starting to automate the UI test, taking those scenarios we've been working on writing and now starting to automate them. And that was from the very beginning. I told them by the time we got to third quarter, we should be comfortable enough with both our process, with writing those scenarios, that we should start to automate. And so that's where we are. And we are using Cucumber. So we'll be starting that. And then, like I said, so that BDD becomes the work. So that writing our tests and scenarios, doing the 3 Amigos meetings or the requirement workshop, really understanding the behavior, that all just becomes second nature to us, and it's not in addition to the work that they are doing. So again, my path to being a testing manager is a little bit different, although in the last session, if anybody was in this room, 2 sessions ago, somebody asked, I think it was in the other room, oh, how many of you plan to go into QA? And I think only one person raised their hand. So we probably all have our story that's not quite so conventional of how we got where we are. But I am still a teacher. I'm still definitely a cheerleader for my team and, supporting them when they need it. All of the time that I spent in professional services was really valuable. That's good experience to bring in if you've worked on the professional services side and, flying out to client sites and working with them, trying to understand their workflows and what makes them unique. That's just like working with a team, right? All of those skills translate. And then, like I said, those question marks behind QA, those are starting to become exclamation points. I still probably won't ever feel completely comfortable in this world, but I really have enjoyed what I am doing. Like I said, I would love to connect with all of you on LinkedIn. I thank you for coming. If you have any questions, we have just a couple of minutes, or you can stay and talk to me. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.